Thank you very much for inviting me on the show. And I'm actually on my way to Beijing, so it will be an interesting time to be on the ground. Well, African countries, if they develop proper strategic focus, can actually draw significant benefits from the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation. The first obvious area is in human resource development. China has shown a willingness that it is, that it is able and capable of developing, human resource capacity and capability on the African continent through scholarships, through fellowships, and other forms of assistance. So I think that is the one obvious area. The other obvious area is in green growth. Looking at the outcome documents that have come out so far, the Chinese side has made a commitment to work with African countries to help their transition from hydroelectric power to renewable energy. So I think that's the other obvious area. The third obvious area, which I think the Chinese side and the African side have been able to find one another halfway, is in the area of market access. Now, there's still a lot of, as you mentioned, quite rightly, there's still quite a number of non-tariff barriers into different Chinese markets, not just the national market, but even smaller markets like Beijing and Yiwu, which can make a big difference to an African economy. And I've seen language to that effect in the outcome document, that the two sides are going to focus a little bit more to try and remove those impediments. But I think the African side has a lot of homework to do in terms of making the structural adjustments to move those economies and to add value so that African countries can stop exporting and relying on commodities, but rather export manufactured goods. That's the only way to close the large deficit between African countries and China.
Paul, you talk about, Africans doing something together, but one of the questions I've had over and over since there was the US-Africa summit was that they did not come to the US with a common agenda. So do they have a common agenda? Should they have one as they continue this summit in Beijing as to what they want to take back to the continent?
Look, I wrote a report around that, which was circulated to some African delegates ahead of this FOCAC. And even ahead of the previous FOCAC, this is one area that I have been quite insistent on, that African countries still do not have a coherent strategy towards China. The African Union does not have a common strategic policy framework, leave alone towards China, but even the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation. Many African analysts on the continent find this unacceptable because FOCAC is 24 years old. And in 24 years, China has been able to release 3 or 4 strategic documents towards Africa, towards the African continent. China knows exactly what it wants to get out of the African continent. One would be hard-pressed to really say with certainty what the African side would like to get out of China and out of the FOCAC mechanism. So I think this is why I say that African countries need to do their homework. Very few African countries, if any, have offices of China coordination, for instance, right? So I think one of the things that is lacking, that is making it extremely difficult for African countries to exert the kind of agency they need to be able to exert, is the lack of a strategic policy framework towards the People's Republic of China. And this really has to change.